Welcome back everyone, this is Legends of Runeterra match analysis number 4, and today's game is going to be Field of Rush up against Ezreal Draven. So yeah, I hope everyone had a safe and enjoyable New Year's, and let's get into it. So I made the choice to only keep Trundle here. Trundle is fantastic in this matchup because Ezreal Draven runs a lot of units with 4 attack, right? It runs Chumpwump, it runs Sump Dredger, and usually Draven with a single axe also obviously threatens to get up to 4 attack. So Trundle having that 5 health with regen stat line just puts in a lot of work blocking these attacks and forcing out usually multiple removal cards to get rid of him. So I definitely kept Trundle. I'm not entirely satisfied with the way I played the rest of the mulligan. I think you could make a case that I could have kept Whale and or Troll Chant. Troll Chant is just really good with Trundle because it's sort of like doubles up on value with the regeneration. Like you don't only keep him alive an extra turn against some removal, but then he regenerates all his health back and puts your opponent very, very far behind. And against a deck like Ezreal Draven, which has a lot of removal, that just gets exponentially more valuable. I also think Withering Whale could have been a keep because Ezreal Draven has just a lot of burn potential, and having just any kind of heal / board clear to stay alive longer is a pretty good tool in this matchup. The reason I kicked those was I really want to have Field of Rush and some kind of ramp here. I actually only run Catalyst as my only ramp in this version, but it's very hard if Ezreal Draven loses tempo by, you know, just having you slam bigger plays than them every turn. It's pretty tough for them to deal with because they don't really have a great catch-up potential, like no board clears or really good answers to Field of Rush. So that's what I was going for with this fairly aggressive mulligan. But I think maybe in a tournament setting where I'm being a bit more cautious, I might have opted to keep either Troll Chant or Withering Whale, just to have some guaranteed value plays against this deck. Because if I drew badly here, like let's say I drew second Trundle, Tryndamere, and Vengeance, then I really have nothing to play till turn 5, and that's not what you want against Ezreal Draven. You'll probably get aggroed down, so fortunately our redraws were pretty good, so that's not going to happen. Most Masters level Ezreal Draven lists don't run any 1-drops these days. They used to run Zonite Urchin, but people sort of realized that it's better without it. So we can't really read anything from the fact that they passed on 1. I've got no plays for the first 2 turns, which is honestly fairly standard for Field of Rush. You're not usually dropping anything before 3, so opponent just plays their House Spider and gets a bit of damage on me. Catalyst is the most intuitive play here, and I think it ended up being the correct one. The other option I could have done is just pass, because Catalyst does leave me a bit open if he wants to develop something like a Draven this turn. Catalyst says, look, I don't have a board clear, you can play Draven. Whereas if I were to pass first, then he might decide to not play a Draven because he's worried about Avalanche this turn into Whale next turn, which is something I could have threatened, right? I had Avalanche and Whale in my hand, but I decided that I think ramping early is obviously more efficient than ramping late because you're getting more total mana throughout the game. So I decided to just do the intuitive play on Catalyst. Avalanching the House Spider wouldn't have made sense. It would have been a pretty bad tempo loss for not much gain. Like, this House Spider is not really threatening enough damage to, I think, justify that. And it would still give him the option of playing a Draven afterwards. So if I'm going to do that either way, I would rather take the ramp than the subpar House Spider clear. My opponent choosing to play Ballistic Bot here really tells me that they do not have Draven. Draven is just a really good turn 3 play, and he basically does everything the Ballistic Bot wants to do, right? They both create discard fodder. The Draven just threatens a bit more damage while doing it. So playing Ballistic Bot is a tell that his hand does not have Draven. My opponent realizes that it's the Trundle turn, so they open attack to get some damage in before he can block them. After combat, I thought about developing Trundle, but my opponent has 6 mana and they have an Ignition in hand, so they could Ignition into a 5 mana Thermo, and that would be a really efficient way of killing my Trundle. Obviously, I don't have enough mana for Troll Chant, so they don't even need to be worried about that. So yeah, I decided Trundle has to be wrong because Thermo is just too good for them, and so I play Avalanche instead. Passing would have also been an option. Their board is not super scary just yet, and we would be burning equivalent mana, so it's not terrible, but I do value my Nexus health in this matchup, and I just want to start, I guess, getting his stuff off the board so that my Nexus can lose less health in the future. After the Ignition, my opponent passes and burns 2 mana, which suggests to me no Sump Dredger and no Chumpwump, because these are really the proactive plays that they're usually going to be dropping on these turns. Since we know that they have no Draven, no Chumpwump, and no Sump Dredger, we can be fairly confident that their hand is filled with reactive plays, so Thermogenic Beams, Ravenous Flocks, maybe Static Shock, just stuff that they can't really play when I have nothing on the board. Now that my opponent has 8 mana up, I feel much better about Trundling because it doesn't give them as free of a Thermo Beam removal. Instead, the response is Arachnoid Sentry into Double Flock, so that's that reactive hand that they had, and this is great for me. Like, this is 2.5 cards by my opponent for just one of mine, and I still get the Ice Pillar out of it. And I'd much rather they blow a sentry on this 4-5 Trundle than on a future leveled up 10-10 Trundle from Field of Rush, right? So we're feeling fine here. We should also start keeping track of their potential Tri-Beam stacks because they played their first 3-cost card of the game.
Safety disengaged. Join me if you want to live. System upgrade.
My opponent open attacks on the next turn, and I have to decide whether I want to play Whale here. Whale does seem fairly intuitive. It effectively heals 6 because it removes the Ballistic Bot, but it also would lock me out of playing Alpha Wildclaw and slows down my game plan a little bit just because it'll take longer for me to start getting these Overwhelm hits in. I deliberate for a bit, and then I decide to play the Whale. My opponent's hand is very thin after doing the Sentry Double Flock last turn, so I'm not too concerned about like quickly closing things out with like Overwhelm damage. I would much rather just take it slow, make sure my Nexus is staying healthy, and eventually I'll just outgrind him because he's low on cards. Whale also leaves us with exactly enough mana to play out our Sentry, with 3 mana left over to be banked, so that on turn 9 we can play Field of Rush, because we want to play Tryndamere next turn, which means we need to bank this turn, so it sort of all works out by playing Whale Sentry this turn. That's just a very natural use of my mana. It is technically a misplay that I just dropped the Sentry after combat. I should have passed first and given him the option to burn a bunch of mana. Maybe he would have taken it. I doubt he would have taken it, but if he did, that would have been preferable than me getting this Sentry out. Instead, they rummage away Thermo Ignition and then play Draven, so they did have a Thermo that was part of their big reactive hand as well. And the play here is pretty obvious. We just get the Draven off the board with Ice Pillar into Tryndamere, and we punch his face for a lot of damage while we're at it. Ezreal Draven really does not run anything that can remove Tryndamere with a single action, so there's probably the best case for my opponent would be a Sentry to stop the Tryndamere attack, but then, I mean, that's perfectly fine because that's one less Sentry for my Field of Rush to get through.
Attack! In Avarosa's name!
After combat, he shows that it was a Mystic Shot, and that takes out my Tryndamere's first life bar. Against a different deck, this might be a genuine issue, because now something like a Ruination could completely answer my Field of Rush. But like I said at the beginning of this video, Ezreal Draven doesn't really run those kinds of Punisher cards that can answer a Field of Rush, so I'm not too concerned with my Tryndamere being leveled. Our opponent rummages away 2 axes and then draws House Spider Ezreal, which he plays right away. These are the cards he just drew, so our reads on his existing hand are exactly the same after this. This is probably the most interesting decision point in the entire match. My opponent is doing something a little strange by attacking with this House Spider, and I wasn't sure why they were doing that at first, but think about what I want to do this turn. I want to play Field of Rush, and that could be really bad if my opponent has Noxian Guillotine, and the fact that my opponent is attacking with this House Spider is like a guarantee that they have either Scorched Earth or Noxian Guillotine, because otherwise they're just throwing a unit away. They want to like damage my Tryndamere or something. So they are getting a Mystic Shot from Ezreal hitting my Nexus, and if they have one more Mystic Shot in hand, and then I play Field of Rush, they can Mystic both of my 10-10 summons and then Guillotine both of them, and that's just really terrible for me. That's like the only way that this deck can possibly deal with Field of Rush. So I decide that I'm not going to play Field of Rush this turn because I just can't risk a game-losing blowout like that, and I Vengeance the Ezreal instead. I don't mind letting my Tryndamere get damaged because, as with a lot of things in this match, I don't mind if he blows the Scorched Earth / Guillotine on this Tryndamere rather than my future Tryndamere from Field of Rush. It turns out Scorched Earth was the option, so I didn't need to play around the Guillotine blowout, but I'm still glad that I did. I think that was definitely correct. I decided to Vile Feast the Spider, and the logic in my head was that my Trundle is not leveled up yet, so I don't want this 1/1 Spiderling chump blocking my 10/10 Trundle next turn when I play Field of Rush. But that was actually a misplay because it's going to get vulnerable anyway if he passes back, so the 1/1 Spiderling wouldn't be chump blocking anything, and yeah, I should have just given him the option to burn a bunch of mana. A slight misplay on my part. My opponent does a 12 mana Thermo to clear off one of the threats. Obviously I'm fine with that. That's like, effectively I paid 0 mana for a 10/10 Trundle. So I will go ahead and use it to kill his Ezreal. I could have also dragged the Ezreal with the pillar and then smacked his face for much more damage, but like I said earlier, the only way I'm going to lose at this point when he's on such a small hand is if I somehow mess up and get burned down. And I don't have Atrocity in my hand, so either way I'm like killing him 2 turns from now, so I don't really super care about dealing 10 to his face. I'd rather just kill the Ezreal and make sure I'm not getting burned out by anything. They play their 3rd Thermogenic Beam, but fortunately I top deck Troll Chant and just end the game on the spot. I'm pretty sure the game was over anyway. Like I have more big units to keep slamming down until they're dead, and they don't really have answers in their hand. Their hand is 2 cards at this point. But Troll Chant just ends the game on the spot because there's no coming back from this tempo swing. They're spending all their mana, and then Trundle's just gonna regenerate the HP anyway, and I have 8 free mana to play around with, so they just resign, and that's the game.
You should be honored.
If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's this moment. When your opponent does something that seems weird, for example this House Spider attack into a 9/9 Tryndamere, always ask yourself, especially if you're like Platinum and above, ask yourself, how can this possibly make sense? And this is often a great way to just gain insights about what's in their hand and what options they have open. Because of this spider attack, we were able to recognize, okay, their option is either Scorched Earth or Guillotine, and because of that, we were able to play around a potentially game-losing throw if they actually had Guillotine instead of Scorched Earth. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a great day.